So it's the end of 2020. I figure I'll make a video on gear that surprised me the most this year that I've tried at my place. I think it's more interesting than me talking about what's the best gear that I've tried this year, because for me there's no such thing as the best. It's all a question of taste. My best is meaningless to you if you don't have the same taste as me. Sometimes when I get emails like, Thomas, what's the best speaker for $2,000? I'm always like, okay, I politely answer them, there's no such thing as the best. It depends what you like, depends on your situation, depends on your room, depends on the music you listen to. And yet I still get people asking me again, despite me saying that to them, surely there must be something that's like the best value for the money. You know, one day I should make this t-shirt, there is no best. Anytime anybody asks me this question in 2021, I'm going to ask them to buy this t-shirt from me. And I'm going to tell them, you're going to get the answer, what is the best on this t-shirt. Now, over the years, I get a chance to try a lot of gear. So for something to surprise me, it has to be out of my expectation. I usually find that in the entry-level gear. You know, sometimes I get gear that are like $10,000. And you know what I do? I put it in the side for months. I don't even take it out of the box. Because when I take it out of the box and I listen to it and it sounds great, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's expected. But whenever I get something that is sub 1,000, and it sounds great, that's where it gets me really excited. All right, so the first product that surprised me the most is the SMSL Tabebuia, which I recently reviewed, which I still cannot pronounce its name, surprised me. Because when I first took it out of the box, it felt like a toy. It's super small, it's light. I'm like, SMSL, do they even know how to make speakers? But when I put it on my desk, that center image that formed was, whoa. I don't actually try a lot of speakers on my desk, and whenever I do, I notice it's usually more a diffuse wall of sound. It's not often that I get that boom, center image. Where's the speaker? I don't get that often. So that's why it surprised me that it came from this no-name brand, well, at least in the world, speaker is no-name brand, that's about $500. And because these days most of the speaker I come across are metal dome, right? And they don't have the same kind of roundness and softness as these silk dome tweeters. So that's why for me, it was a very pleasant surprise. Now keep in mind, the PMC DB1 will beat the speaker objectively. That's why I said this is not a video about the best, but rather the one that surprised me the most. It surprised me enough that I'm like, you know what? Being the cheap guy I am, who's always looking for like the best value for the money, I can actually sell my main speakers on my desk, and this is what I did. You know what's the downside of making a video like this? Now that I present the SMSL speaker like this, there's no way it's gonna meet your expectation. Anyway, the second thing that surprised me was the Manapan LRS. Now some of you might be going like, Thomas, what's the big deal? Everyone's been saying the Manapan LRS is fantastic, so why is it surprising? The fact that it sounds good was not surprising. When I first heard it at my friend's place, Mr. Kanta's home, I was like, wow, it sounds really good. But I expected that. When I tried it first at my home, it sounded good and it was within my expectation. What was surprising, as I mentioned in my review video, is when I plug in a high power integrated amp to it. It's like I've been driving this Mustang V6 all this time. Yeah, it's great, it's powerful. And then I discover a turbo button on it. That's where it's surprising. The performance difference between normal gear and high-end gear with this LRS doesn't even have to be high-end probably. Maybe a high-power amp. The difference, the delta, was what blew me away. So much so that I called my friend up. I said, dude, man, you got to listen to this. Anyway, he bought it off me, and hopefully he get the chance to experience it too. So that's the second thing. Next is the Yamaha Wxa50. Some of you will probably be angry at me for not ever talking about it. This is a hidden gem, especially on the used market. I got mine for 300 something. Best value for 300 something. You want the word best? There you go. Best value for 300 something if you're okay with Class D, if you have an external DAC. Okay, let me just add that in. The first time I heard it was actually maybe a year ago. I put it this year because I bought it this year. And plus I want to use this excuse to talk about it. And I remember the first time I heard it was with the RP8000F, the Klipsch. The synergy was fantastic with the musical paradise. So much so that at the time, it was competing with all the other sub-1000 integrated amp that I was reviewing. The Yamaha just kicked them away. It's like not even a competition. But keep in mind that was with the Klipsch 8000F. We don't know if we try another speaker. I know that it didn't do too well with the Polk 707, okay? So it still is speaker dependent. But when it did well, it did exceptionally well. So even though, as you know, I don't need any integrated amp, I got a gazillion of them at my home. When it showed up on the used market, I have to have it. I bought it, I used it maybe 2-3 times, put it on the side. I don't care. Recently, I lent it to Mr. Kanta. And he was telling me, dude, man, this thing is better than that $1,000 plus integrated amp, which I won't name, that you lent me the other day. It's more dynamic, it's faster, it's more fun, it's livelier. This has everything. This is actually better than the other one, and you pay like 300 something bucks for it. What the hell? The DAC on it is okay. It's just that there's a bit of digital glare that I hear. But once you put an external DAC to it, fantastic. And on top of that, it has a network port. You probably can stream to the thing. I didn't try it, but just by Bluetooth alone is good enough. So if you ever come across one about 300-400 bucks on the used market, Canadian, you should grab it, man. It's one of those gear that will surprise you. Next, we have the BC Acoustique EX214 integrated amp. Now, this integrated amp, I have not reviewed it yet. The first night when I got it, powered it on for 30 minutes. I post on my community page right away, telling people, guys, if you're planning to buy an integrated amp, you should wait for my review. The next day, I lent it to Dennis. Dennis, let me just take out the message here, got the integrated amp, and the same night he messaged me, holy crap, the BC Acoustique is playing upstairs with a pair of Tannoy Satin S6, to which I always had a hidden sub for extra bass. No need for a sub now. Loudness on, and my floor is shaking, and yet there's tons of detail. They are going to sell loads of this. So this is the sneak peek. I'll say this, if you like V-curve, wait for my review, man. I should get a t-shirt printed out like V-curve forever. And this is like our secret handshake, because if you see somebody else wearing a t-shirt with V-curve forever written on it, you know that he's an audiophile. And the last one is the Devialet D200. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. It looks beautiful. And here's the thing. I think this is a Class A hybrid Class D running in parallel. I don't know, man. I read it on the forums. I won't be surprised that this is a digital amp, not a Class D amp. But I don't have time to research it. Now, for sure, it's not a Class AB amp, okay? And when I first got it, I had a certain expectation because I listened to a lot of Class D amps before. But right now, I'm trying to get these Concept 500 to sound its best. And it sounded the best of the D200. You see, what surprised me is that I was expecting Class D sound, and I got not Class D sound, okay? It's actually rich, warm, and here's the funny part. Right now, this integrated amp, you can load profiles to optimize for specific speakers. So I can go online, download the Concept 500 profile, put it on this integrated amp, and it will optimize it. Apparently, it'll extend the bass further down and so forth. But I didn't know that in the beginning. So I brought it home, plug it in, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this sounds better than the Macintosh that I was trying in the morning, the 275, that's the MC275 tubes, the Macintosh MAC6700, the all my other integrated amps, the more higher end ones, okay? And I'm scratching my head, why? And later on, then I say, oh, there's such a thing as profile. Now when I turn it off, I'm like, okay, it sounds more familiar, like the Class D-ish sound. But when it's on, and right now it's running the wrong profile, the profile is for a totem signature one or something like that, but it sounds good. And you know me, I don't care, man. I don't need the right profile. I always say, if I have to, I'll plug a microwave into my system to get it to sound good. I don't care what I put in, as long as it sounds good. That's just my philosophy. So I'm enjoying these Concept 500 right now with this wrong profile on this Devialet D200. Who knows, maybe once I put the right profile, it'll sound even better. But what surprised me the most is the fact that it did not sound like a Class D amp when I had it set up to this profile. All right, so let's end the video at this point. Now, everything I talk about today is not necessarily the best of its class, okay? However, I feel like they're interesting enough that it's worth me to take the time to make a video to let you know. So should you ever come across them, either on the used market or in a store, you know what? Spend a few minutes with them. They might surprise you too. All right, with that said, I'll see you next year.